Not a lot of founders, especially in the drone industry, has actual experience in flying this massive plane.
Seeing now is that we are where manned aviation was 100 years ago.
How fast the aerospace and space industry innovated just because 3D printing was invented. Imagine just being able to create your prototype in a few days instead of having to take it weeks just to get the parts that you need.
Level 5 is really kind of like the movie Terminator. It will map for you and it will tell you, hey, I'm exploring, and
Yeah.
here's
You can make it explore the most scariest and most diverse environment
absolutely.
automatically. That saves lives, genuinely. I mean, imagine instead of just sending another human being in there.
Medical supplies and some logistics and things like that. Our drones, you can learn to fly in a matter of weeks. Airplanes are changing and the kind of innovation that's happening.
Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we delve into the ever changing and accelerating pace of global change and its impact on our lives. I'm your host, John Paul Flores, broadcasting live from the New World Studio. Today, we're diving into the world of AI and automation. As an enthusiast and expert in lead generation, I will guide you through understanding and leveraging these technologies for your business and for your personal use. And don't forget, AI and automation might be unstoppable forces, but that doesn't mean you are powerless. Tune in to learn how to make them work for you and not the other way around. But first, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the New World Podcast, where we navigate the changing world around us. I'm your host, John Flores, specializing in lead generation and AI automation, here to help you understand how our world is changing and what it means for you. In this episode, we have Pramod Raheja, CEO and co-founder of Airgility, to explore the transformative impact of autonomous air robotics with over 30 years of experience as a pilot and captain at United Airlines. So you see, he's not just focused on autonomy, he actually did fly these massive planes. And yeah, Pramod, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John Paul. I appreciate it very much.
Not a lot of founders, especially in the drone industry, has actual experience in flying this massive plane. So yeah, it's an amazing thing. And yeah, by the way, before we begin on the in-depth question, because I do have some, do you mind giving us a quick intro on who Pramod is, experiences, expertise, and what keeps you busy these days?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I'm really what I would describe as an aviation and aerospace, nut. I've had spaceships and airplanes on my walls ever since I was like 4 or 5 years old, and in fact, as I got older, wanted to study them, and so I studied aerospace engineering in college, and started flying and just really enjoyed that. So, as you pointed out earlier, became a professional pilot, and along the way, also became an entrepreneur. And fast forward to 7 years ago, co-founding Airgility, and really what I feel like is we're going through is an aerospace evolution in the world right now, both in uncrewed aviation, as we're talking about
Yeah,
with drones, manned aviation as well. Airplanes are changing, and the kind of innovation that's happening there,
yeah,
and also in space as well. We've got a lot going on with space technology and in going into orbit, and obviously we see that in the news all the
yeah.
time now with Blue Origin and SpaceX and all the things that are going on that we see every week almost
Yeah.
now something new.
It's fascinating how fast the aerospace and space industry innovated just because 3D printing was invented.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, there's a lot of innovations,
yeah.
absolutely.
Imagine just being able to create your prototype in a few days instead of having to take it weeks just to get the parts that you need.
Absolutely, and in fact, even when we started Airgility, that was one of our, I would call, advantages early on,
Yeah,
was the fact that we could prototype very fast.
yeah,
It was definitely a differentiator. We could
yeah,
literally prototype overnight, just like you're
yeah.
describing, and next day we're flying. Yeah,
Allows you to make all the mistakes that you need. Oh,
Yeah,
really? Yeah, it's amazing. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong. Your drones have level 4 autonomy.
that's correct. Yeah. So
Yes.
for anybody listening here, that's a very high level of autonomy.
Yeah.
There are five levels of autonomy. Level five is really kind of like the movie Terminator, if you've seen that.
Skynet. Yeah.
Skynet, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not really doesn't really exist. But yeah, and even level four, there's various levels of
Yeah.
autonomy, and yeah, we're within that, and we are at a level where the robots can essentially fly themselves, and the operator can intervene
Yeah.
and do things as needed. But if you let the drone do what you want it to do, it'll automatically do things as well.
Really? So, can you use that in a use case? Let's say you send it in a house to just scan the perimeter. It can do that automatically.
Correct. Yes. Another good example might be,
Yeah.
in a building, you want to search a building and you want to map it out,
Yeah.
maybe, or in a security setting,
Yeah.
with police or the military, they want to send in the flying drone to take a look at things and get around versus a
Yeah.
human that can keep the human out of harm's way. So there's a lot of different use cases for these
Yeah.
types of technologies to be used. Absolutely.
You probably have one of the coolest drone names in the industry, Minotaur. Why Minotaur?
Yeah. So first of all of our naming conventions are Greek mythology, just because we like Greek mythology.
Yeah.
But aside from that, the names do have meanings. So Minotaur, for example, was a mythical creature in Greek mythology that inhabited the labyrinth. And
Yeah.
so the idea here is the Minotaur is a vehicle that can go into tunnels and dark, confined, complex environments.
Yeah.
And hence, the Minotaur also, our Minotaur also
Yeah.
inhabits the labyrinth.
You can make it explore the most scariest and most diverse environment
Absolutely.
automatically. That saves lives, genuinely. I mean, imagine instead of just sending another human being in there on the
Yes.
crossbars, you can send your drones. Yeah, if they
Yes.
don't come back, who cares? They're drones. But if another human being doesn't come back, that's a father that's gonna be lost.
Absolutely. That's exactly the idea. You've grasped it very well.
Yeah, was watching your videos for a while. And can you talk more about why you founded this company? Because your experience in is as a pilot, so why not create a company that is primarily based on creating autonomous planes? I mean, I don't think there's such a thing, but yeah, why not focus on bigger planes? Why drones?
Yeah. Well, I think that uncrewed systems
Yeah,
is, when I say uncrewed systems, I'm referring to drones, of course.
yeah,
There's very big advancements happening and will
yeah,
continue to happen for a while.
yeah,
And what I always am seeing now is that we are where manned aviation
yeah,
was 100 years ago. So if you
yeah,
go back to the 1920s, the airplane was a pretty new invention, and it started before flying passengers. It started flying mail
yeah.
and then cargo,
Really?
and eventually people in the 1930s, really.
Yeah,
And we're 100 years later at the same inflection point with uncrewed systems, which
yeah,
is we are flying some delivery, around the world. There are
yeah,
deliveries happening, and medical supplies and some logistics and things like that. But eventually, if you kind of have heard the term urban air mobility, which is
yeah,
really bigger vehicles, bigger drones almost, yeah, they will carry people anywhere
yeah,
from, let's say 2 to 6 passengers, maybe more in the future. But for now, smaller, small numbers that go from point A to point B, short distances that otherwise you would sit in traffic for 3 hours, but
yeah,
you get to where you need to go in 20 minutes. And we'll probably see much more of that, in the 2030s and
yeah,
2040s. I think that's still 7 to 10 years away from really seeing a lot of that, at least that. So,
yeah,
but it is almost the same thing happening 100 years
yeah.
later, uncrewed aviation. Yeah.
When you said we can pick up people with drones, when it innovated, I was thinking like you meant like you have drones that is, just the bigger sizes, but it basically have some harness and you can just put it around you and it will just carry you. Air Uber.
Well, yeah, air Uber. Yeah, well, that is a term that is used
Yeah,
for urban air mobility, which is Uber of the skies, right?
yeah,
And there are certain cities in the world that are really a little more progressive than others. I
Yeah.
think Dubai is one where they, you might see
Oh
that
yeah.
sort of thing in Dubai first. I think we'll see, but that's what I'm observing at the moment. And the other thing I'll add is that going back to your question around
Yeah.
why not doing something with airplanes. I think manned aviation is definitely also experiencing advancements.
Yeah.
However, not anywhere near at the pace
Yeah.
of the uncrewed systems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's dangerous, especially if let's say you have a drone where you can ride, and you can just basically drive the drone. It's dangerous. You can basically hit anyone at any height at any time.
Yeah,
Scary.
well, also keep in mind that the aviation industry is highly regulated,
Yeah. Absolutely.
around the world, right? So as these machines start to take shape, regulatory requirements also take shape, and in
Yeah.
some cases, especially in the U.S.,
Yeah.
the regulatory requirements sometimes become obstacles to technology advancement because you might have some great technology, but you can't put it into use because of regulatory requirements and issues, and so in the U.S. at least you have to get waivers and things to do things, and that'll eventually change. But
Yeah.
for now, it's a requirement which typically costs money and
Yeah.
time and expertise as well,
Yeah.
and so they can be barriers to entry,
Yeah.
but a lot of companies are getting through that, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
great things happening.
Besides the use case of examining the perimeter, maybe scanning a building, what other uses does Minotaur have?
Yeah, on the commercial side, because it's a vehicle that's quite versatile and it can be used indoor and outdoor, and it
Yeah.
also doesn't require a GPS signal. It flies without GPS. That allows it to do a lot of things. So we've seen use case using it in, of course, in tunnels, as I mentioned earlier, cylindrical silo type, areas where your tanks and things that need to get inspected, and also even outdoors between buildings where you might lose a GPS signal because of the being blocked by a building or what have you, and being able to fly in those areas. So most I would say most missions are visual data collection, where they're looking for to inspect something and they need photos and or video, and those are the predominant use cases, and that data is what people are looking for. The platform, which is the Minotaur, allows them to, of course, get that data that's important to them. And in many cases, it replaces what you talked about earlier, which is the status quo, which means, hey, you know what? We used to do that job with a human that had to climb a ladder or
Yeah.
go into a dangerous spot. And it took a lot longer to do that, and it was dangerous. So our when you talk about return on investment, safety has its own return on investment, right?
Yeah.
In addition to money, of course. But saving time doing some sort of task, of
Yeah.
course, equates to money. And then, of course, keeping a human out of harm's way is another
Yeah.
ROI that obviously is, saves money, but also keeps people safe. Just
Yeah.
that's, real simple.
Yeah, especially at those, highly critical times where maybe there's an armed human being in the building. Instead of waiting for SWAT calling them and they taking a few minutes to get there, that's valuable time. You don't know what they're
Yes.
gonna do. Instead of, waiting for them, you can just simply send the drone in, and when they come
Mhm.
in, they already have the data and they can just swoop in.
Yes, correct.
It's fascinating what technology, especially this drone industry, is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any other models besides Minotaur?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. And it's not on that YouTube site you were looking at yet, but we'll be putting some things up pretty soon. Which is we are working on a larger vehicle that is much bigger, that is a heavy payload that will carry somewhere between 50 and 75 pounds, and can travel up to 10 miles or so. And completely battery powered. When I say 10 miles, I mean 10 miles out. So really 20 miles. So out and back would be, 20 miles if we were to use that as an, and it is a thrust vectoring vehicle, which meaning that the blades rotate. So you turn into from vertical flight to forward flight. Not as efficient as a fixed wing aircraft or a fixed wing drone, but still moves pretty fast across the sky, and gives a lot more range and endurance to a client that needs that, and carries a lot of weight. 50 to 75 pounds is quite a bit. And most, I think, drones that are out there today that can lift that sort of weight don't go very far and stay in the
Yeah,
air just for a few minutes, And so this, I think, becomes a game changer and
yeah.
differentiator. We are working with the United States Department of Defense on some missions for that, right?
And, I don't think people realize how important it is, the ability to land anywhere, because you can make it upwards, and when
Yeah,
you do it sideways, it can basically turn into high speed vehicle.
that's right.
That saves time, and it allows you to not just save time, but doesn't necessarily need the runway to actually make it function.
Exactly. That's right. You do not need a runway. You can land and take off anywhere. And even though it's a relatively larger vehicle, it still fits, in the back of, an SUV or a pickup
Yeah,
truck, or so it's transportable as well. You don't need a lot of setup. You take it out. It probably does take two people,
yeah.
to lift it, but still very transportable.
I think, are you gonna be planning on having use case in terms of the medical space for your new drone?
Yeah. So we're very driven by
Yeah,
mission and purpose, and I personally as well really like the medical logistics and medical delivery
yeah,
space, because I think that also, going back to, say, we've talked a few times on this
yeah,
podcast about saving time, and I
yeah,
think that saves time too. So an example would be, we could use almost any city in the world.
yeah,
I'll use Mumbai, India as one. The traffic is crazy there, right? So you could go just a few miles and sit in traffic for 2 hours. But if you had a drone like this that could, carry 25 pounds, 50 pounds, we'll call it, whatever, of supplies, whether it's, crucial drugs or blood or what have you, that needs to go from one hospital to another, which, does happen quite often, actually, you could do that in a matter of minutes versus hours. And so, the other thing is, as you probably know, that's happening around the world is in very remote areas
yeah.
also. Zipline, which is another company,
Oh
is
yeah,
doing,
I watched it.
doing, yeah, they're doing, these kind of things in Rwanda, and more other places as
Yeah,
well. Rwanda was first, but um, they have their own system. It's not a heavy payload system. They're small drones, but
yeah,
they can deliver,
yeah,
crucial things to these small villages and towns. Right.
yeah.
So
But the problem is, what they're doing is great, but the problem is, if they want to expand, it's gonna take a lot of resources, because they need to build this heavy
yeah,
zipline things that can catch their
that's right.
drones. Yeah, but with your technology, you can basically set up at any time, at any place. You just,
That's right.
as a hospital calling, hey, we need this to be delivered in this location. Sure, we'll send a team where we have a drone on the back of it, and
That's
just
right.
make it fly. Doesn't need any setup. Doesn't need. You just need clear skies, and
Yeah,
every place has clear skies.
that's right. And you bring up a good point. All these new technologies,
Yeah,
there's always trade-offs, right?
yeah,
So in the case that you just described with Zipline, great technology, great mission use case, but yes, it requires some infrastructure
yeah,
that is not that easy to just put anywhere,
yeah,
right? And takes a little time. And if you could just transport something, in the back of a truck or another airplane or what have
yeah.
you, it's so much easier.
I think the better thing in zipline is that they can fly up for a very, very long time. I think that's one of the best thing that they have. So I think they're better at remote places. But if you're gonna
Yes,
be in a city setting where you can just set up something where it's gonna be a zipline type model, where there's gonna be a runway and all this, still need clear space. Even though it doesn't need a lot of space, it still needs space, and it's
right.
dangerous. Because if you're gonna do it in the middle of a city, there's gonna be stoplights. There's gonna be maybe other people flying their kites. It's dangerous. But if you have a drone as yours, you can
Yep,
just do it. Yeah, it's not very
absolutely.
dangerous. Yeah,
Yeah, and the other side of the coin there is,
yeah,
in some of these use cases, helicopters are used, but
yeah,
it's so much more expensive,
yeah,
right? To run the helicopter, and the fuel involved, and even just the helicopter itself, the cost to operate
yeah.
outside of the fuel is quite pricey compared to these drones.
And even if the cost is not that high, the fact that is you can just store one helicopter in your hospital, because it's very big. It's very massive. But you
That's
can
right.
have a lot of drones.
That's right.
Yeah, probably 20 drones in one space for a
Yeah,
center.
it depends, but yes, that's a number to use.
Yeah. And what if you need to deliver someplace where they don't have any landing area for a
That's
helicopter?
right. Yeah, you need a fairly good footprint for a helicopter.
Yeah, and they're massive. They're scary.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever flown helicopter?
I have. Yes, it's been a long, long, long time, but yes, I have.
But what's the main difference between flying it between a
Well,
plane?
obviously, yeah, you have, you're flying vertically, right? So
Yeah,
the controls are quite different in terms of how you control the blades and going up and down and side to side. So just to, just I think I would say it's a little more hand-eye coordinate. If you look at the
yeah,
traditional helicopter, and there are other what I would call um, you know things you have to be careful about. So when you're
yeah,
hovering and landing and things like that, yeah, there's it's just a very different approach to it versus an airplane where you're what we would call flare. You're landing and you're coming in for a flare.
yeah.
You're doing something similar in a helicopter, but you want to let it down nice and soft.
I think the good thing about a plane is if you lose your engine, you can still land it instead of a helicopter.
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, I should have probably said that. That's actually a really good point. That's a
You're
very good
screwed.
point.
Yeah, you can't just glide it. You're gonna die. You can't do anything. But yeah,
Yes.
let's talk more about Minotaur because it's your prominent product. How long does it take for someone who has never flown a drone before, who let's say isn't used to any of these kind of technologies? How long does it take for me to learn it?
Great question. So traditionally, most, if we look at a lot of drones that are out there being used for, military use or even, in the commercial sector, police, etc., public, people buy drones and it takes, a few days to train them. Sometimes it takes a week. I've seen, and, and, uh, and even longer to become proficient. Our drones, you can learn to fly in a matter of minutes. So we've even had, um, kids.
Yeah,
My co-founder's 9-year-old son was flying our drones within just a few minutes of learning how to operate. We always used to say it only takes 30 seconds of training. That's maybe a little bit of a stretch, but within a few minutes you could be operating it. And so it really, I mean, to go back direct to answer your question directly, it doesn't require any skill at all.
yeah.
Autonomy.
It's amazing. And in terms of usability, because most of the time the need to use this is not probably on a training ground where you have mapped out coordinates for the drone. Does your drone need these coordinates, this floor plan to actually move around, or does it just know?
Yeah, so it does not need a floor plan. We typically can put in what we call waypoints or points to fly to, and the drone will figure out how to get there on its own. So if there's a wall in between or a door and it can't get through, it's going to keep trying until it can no longer get through, and then it'll land. It'll just land or come back home to you, depending on how you've told what you do. The way to think of our drones is more like a robot than a drone, right? Where we can tell it certain things. Like I would say, like if then statements. If you can't get to the destination, go ahead and land. Or if you run out of battery, right? Or if you can't get to the destination and you need to get to the shortest point, you need to get home. Figure out the shortest point, shortest way,
Yeah,
and just get home, get back
yeah,
home. So it's more like a robot, than it
yeah,
is a drone in the sense of what we think of drones. And so, but to answer your question a little further, yeah, it doesn't require a map. It will map for you, and it will tell you, hey, I'm exploring, and
yeah,
here's the map, and we can see that map on our interface that we
yeah.
use as it's being mapped, actually. So it's quite incredible.
So basically, what happens if you send it in a random house without giving it any destination? Just say go in. What happens?
It will go in and it will start to fly around and map the room or house on its own and
Yeah,
fly as much as it can, within reason. If it comes to a door that that's
yeah,
closed and it can't get through or what have you, and then you as the operator could say, I want you to get the other side of the house, figure out how to do it. It'll keep trying to do that
yeah,
until it, like I said earlier, until it no longer can get through or it finds a way through. And so you can let it loose and it'll just start exploring, and
that's
then you
nice.
as a human operator, if you see that happening but you want to now direct it to go somewhere else, you could do that from
Yeah.
your interface as well.
And how long does it fly?
So this drone specifically, the Minotaur,
Yeah,
is designed as more of like we talked about earlier, more indoor. Even though it flies everywhere, it's
yeah,
kind of more of an indoor outdoor. So it's not optimized for endurance. So about 15 to 20 minminutes, which
that's
is actually pretty good for a
yeah,
drone like that. A lot of indoor drones are more like 7 to 8 minutes
yeah,
kind of flight time. This drone with one of the things we haven't done yet is really optimize how we use the batteries.
yeah,
As as battery technology improves, and we probably will be replacing the batteries in this with more
yeah.
smarter batteries, we'll probably extend that flight time.
That's
So
still good, especially because it's thinking on its own. It's using computing powers, not just the propellers itself. It's thinking. So yeah, I think 15 minutes of flight time is incredible, and it's
yeah,
not
and that's
like
a great. That's you actually bring up a really good point.
yeah,
Most of our drones in that world don't have those brains on board,
yeah,
right?
and 15 minutes.
So the fact that the brain is on board, it is using computational power,
Yeah,
hence using battery. So it's still
yeah,
flight time,
yeah.
given all those considerations.
Yeah, because as you said before, it doesn't need GPS to actually make it work. So if that's the reasoning, then probably it's probably not thinking via the module you're holding. It's probably thinking via drone itself.
Right.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when you said it's full autonomy, is it actually smart enough to get through a door without hitting?
Yeah. So I think
Yeah,
we have just to differentiate.
yeah,
If there's a door opening and it's open, yes, it can absolutely get through without hitting anything. And I think the smallest door we've ever flown through is about 27 inches across. So
yeah,
approximately that, we'll call
yeah,
it for today. Um, if the door is closed, of course, then yes, it's not going to get through the door, right? The door has to be opened
yeah,
somehow. So what we're seeing in the world of robotics is like, especially in like the military and or the police, they use multiple robots to do
yeah,
these jobs. So you might have the flying robot like ours, but then there might be a ground robot that tries to open, right.
yeah,
And so there's what we would call machine to machine teaming
yeah,
that's taking place. And at the end of the day, it's really human to machine, teaming,
yeah,
where the humans are sort of operating and watching over all this, but the machines are working together to get
yeah,
the job done, right? Because not any one machine can't do it all, right?
yeah.
So you have different machines doing different.
I was thinking, what if your drones, as you said, is it has this if then function. What if you see a man with a gun, then hit it?
Well, that is actually possible.
Yeah,
So
that's cool. Imagine you
that's
send in 10 drones and there's five people who have a gun. You just said, hey, explore this, and if you see someone who has a gun, hit them directly, and they're probably gonna get knocked down.
Yeah, so that's where we use AI,
Yeah,
and what's special also about the Minotaur is the idea that you can put AI libraries on board. So
yeah,
we can put up to five, and with two operating at any given time, meaning that you can have the what you would call AI on the edge, so that
yeah,
as some anomaly is detected. In this case, the anomaly
yeah,
was the person with the gun, and we actually have video of this. And where now the robot sees the person with the gun, and they
yeah,
immediately flag it and send a message to the operator,
yeah,
saying, "I see something here. You may want to pay attention."
yeah,
Um, and because I'm seeing what you asked me to see, and you're using essentially AI to do that,
yeah.
machine learning. So, again, that is on the drone itself, on the
Yeah,
edge.
yeah. And imagine if you can have this. I don't know if you already have this high frequency speakers where if they see an anomaly, they just basically blast through this deafening sound, making anyone in that room incapable of doing anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah,
Well, so we haven't done that, but that is
yeah,
possible too.
yeah. That's a good thing to add because you don't need to sacrifice your drone necessarily to make someone incapable of doing anything.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. Good point.
maybe even the blinding lights.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, let's talk about the cameras in your drones. What if there's not any light within the area?
Yeah, so we don't need lights.
Yeah,
We use a sensor package with lidar being kind of
yeah,
a primary sensor, and with lidar, you can operate in any kind of lighting conditions. So
yeah,
lidar is essentially emitting laser beams at a certain frequency,
yeah,
and those, they're essentially bouncing off what it sees, and different lidars have different ranges. We use a small lidar, has a very, big range. It's probably 300 to 400 feet that it can
Yeah.
see things around. And and essentially, you could be in the complete pitch black, and it'll still fly and try to get the footage and the data that you need. Obviously, then the limitation is more with your camera. But if you're using a camera that is night vision or heat, EOIR, all that, then you'll still get your data,
Yeah. But
most likely.
when the feed gets transmitted through the controller, if there's no light, how can an operator see it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's a complete function of the camera itself, the actual camera
Yes.
for the data feed, and that's why I mentioned
Yeah.
cameras. But then you can integrate with others, and so in our
Yeah.
case, we can integrate with quite a few different cameras.
And I think what can be done if you don't have a great cabinet is, those when you buy a brand new VR headset and you use LiDAR technology to basically map everything out, and there's like this geometric lines where you can see where the aspect is, right? The curves and whatnot. If you can just, it's pitch black and you can see all of these lines just getting transmitted all through you. It's amazing. Looks
Yeah,
cool.
absolutely.
Yeah. I know you're thinking about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we think about. Yeah, it's you can't do it all. We do
Yeah,
what we talk we figure out what the market's looking for and
yeah.
customers, and then we work on those things as priorities.
And I also saw that you have this, correct me if I'm wrong, HSO1 drone.
Yeah, so that one is, we do have that, but that one is not in commercial production. It was a prototype.
Yeah,
In the world of what we do, there's a lot of R&D,
yeah,
and not everything makes it out, to the markets.
yeah,
It really depends. And being a small company as we are, you have to really focus and
yeah,
decide what you're going to focus on. And we a few years ago started to really focus on Minotaur type technology. We
yeah,
were seeing demand. We were getting some funding for it, and it was also what we would call blue ocean, meaning that there
yeah,
wasn't. It was a hard problem to solve,
yeah,
so there was opportunity space. And if we could do it, we would have a lot of great opportunities. So we really focused on that. So the HS1, while it's a great prototype, is not in commercial production, and whether it makes it to commercial production or not is yet to be determined.
yeah. But what's the main function of it? What's the main goal of that drone?
Yeah, it's similar to what we were talking about with our other drone, which is called the Chaos, which is not on our website yet, by the way, which will be very soon. And it's a delivery. It was designed for delivery and logistics,
Yeah,
so transporting whatever medical supplies, cargo,
yeah,
food, etc. The drone we're working on right now, Chaos, has a lot more payload capability than
yeah,
the HS1. The HS1 was really a fairly small payload, maybe 5 pounds or
yeah,
so, and maybe a little bit more, but fairly good volume. You could put a lot of things in it, but the Chaos actually gives you more volume and more weight. So,
yeah,
from a practicality standpoint, we're working with
yeah.
the Chaos right now.
You said the chaos. I thought you named things via Greek.
Yeah. So, and forgive me, I don't know all
Yeah,
the history behind the Chaos, but that is actually a Greek mythology name too.
really?
So there's actually some things going on there that my
Yeah,
partner, was enamored with, and
yeah,
I actually, kind of, the story escapes me right now. So
yeah.
apologies for that.
What other, what's your end goal for the chaos drone?
Yeah, I think the end goal there is to really continue to develop that
Yeah,
into a great um, uh, delivery, logistics, cargo type drone. We're seeing that in the market that there'll be a lot more opportunities for cargo
yeah,
and delivery versus carrying humans in the near future with drones.
yeah,
Um, so that's what we hope. We hope it becomes a predominant player in that
yeah.
market of carrying 50 to 75 pounds.
And what does it take to actually carry more than 200 pounds? How big of an aircraft would you need?
So that gets into now what we would call engineering, and
Yeah,
and how big is your vehicle? How big are the propeller blades?
yeah,
How much power comes from the engines? So and as you scale up, the aerodynamics, the tuning of the motors and the blades, all that changes quite
yeah,
a bit. even the controllers you use on board, the autopilots, things like that. Everything does change
Yeah.
for these different missions. So you you really scaling is possible for
Yeah.
sure, like you asked, but it just requires a little bit of different engineering.
So it's not just you make the parts bigger, you actually have to do something more.
Yeah, when you think about it, these machines fly as a combination of hardware and software.
Yeah.
So the hardware alone doesn't change.
Yeah.
You have to also work with the software to make the hardware work the way you want it to work.
You know, as you said, you graduated how do you say it?
Aerospace.
Aerospace engineer. Why didn't you just go the engineering route after college? Why did you decide to become a pilot?
Just that, that's a question when you ask a pilot, it's kind of like a very binary question. It's a one or a zero. And I just really fell in love with it and
Yeah.
decided that's what I wanted to do. So we'd like to really align ourselves with a larger strategic partner, whether that's through investment or even a merger and acquisition, to continue to do what we're doing and give whoever that is capability that they didn't have
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And so that's what we see happening with
Yeah.
Airgility, in, realistically from a business perspective.
That's amazing. And do you have any advice for anyone who's listening who might be interested in going the aerospace route?
Yeah, I would say, like, I would give advice to anybody is do things that you like and are passionate about. So when I say like, I mean, do things that where you don't feel like it's a job. Like,
Yeah.
you actually enjoy doing it, and you feel fortunate,
Yeah.
to make a living doing it. And that would be my advice. And it would
Yeah.
be the same advice if you were going into medicine or law or anything. But what I can say is, for anybody that is interested in aerospace, that it is a growing market
Yeah.
for aerospace engineers and will be for a long time to come. When I graduated from college, it was not a very good time for aerospace engineers. There wasn't a lot happening. It was after the space shuttle program, and NASA was trying to figure out what they wanted to do in the U.S. and there wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah.
But fast forward to 2015 or so, maybe a little before that,
Yeah.
things started to really take shape, and now we're experiencing that revolution, and I think that will go on for the next 20 years or so at least.
Especially with the use of AI, it basically just
Yes,
made everything work. Yeah.
that's right.
And since we're in the topic of autonomy, can you just quickly explain the different levels of autonomy? Level one, two, three, four, five. What does it look like for each of them?
Yeah, without going into each one specifically, that could take some time. You start with one, which is almost really nothing, and in the early levels of autonomy, we're talking more automation is really what we're talking about. So, for example, I'll jump to level three, where you're programming in GPS coordinates. Level two, three, you're programming in GPS coordinates into a drone and saying fly from point A to point B to point C to point D. That's more what I would call automation, not autonomy. But it still kind of gets grouped, in the levels of autonomy. And then as you get to three, four, now the robot is able to make decisions in real time, or do things on its own based on a cue, right? And so that's how you graduate from, like, very low level or no autonomy to higher levels of autonomy, to four. And if you Google levels of autonomy, all these graphics will pop up. And sort of, and they're some of these graphics are different, but they're all essentially pretty similar, that do a good job of explaining how levels of autonomy work.
No, when you were explaining it, two, three, level two, three, where you just input, go here from here. I think that's where most drone companies are currently.
Yes, correct. That's right. That is exactly right. Most are,
Yeah.
but the future is with a higher level, and that's where everybody wants to be and wants to
Yeah.
go. Hey, how do we get our drones to be more autonomous so we don't need such skilled operators, and also the missions can be accomplished
Yeah.
without human having to do too much. So, and there will always be a human in the loop, for especially for critical missions, um, but they don't
Yeah.
they're more monitoring and being the captain, commander, versus having to be the tactician and have to press every button and do everything.
Yeah. How far of a development phase does it actually take from that going level 3 to level 4?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so we actually have our own sort of historical roadmap
Yeah,
that I could share, which kind of explains how we did what we did
yeah,
from from back then to now. And but In our case, it was easily a couple years, of hardcore algorithm development and software development to be able to do these things. And even when you do that, it still requires testing and and figuring out where there's edge cases, as well. Like, I would say that if you can, edge cases where things, become harder, and now you have to figure out and solve those problems. Where edge case might be, well, the machine does a great job, with this task, but then if we try to have it do this thing that's just a little bit off of that, it doesn't do it, and so now you're kind of figuring out how to solve that problem.
yeah. When we were talking, I just this popped up into my head. Where did you see that reel where there's this VA working as a cashier in a restaurant? Did you did you manage to see that?
I don't think I saw that. No, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it was in New York. Basically, instead of an employee actually man taking the orders and putting it on the back to make the orders, no, they had this computer where you can just talk to it. Where there's a VA in the far, far south talking with them.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yes, absolutely.
imagine if you have these Uber-like companies in the future where they use drones, and instead of having actual people on the ground flying it, there's just a fleet of VAs around the world where they control the drones and delivering it.
Yes, I could see that
Yeah.
as a very distinct possibility.
No, seeing all this innovation, especially with the blockchain and everything, I think around 50 years or so, everything would be a level economy. It's interesting. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the skill of another person from another world, from US or from Africa or from uh China, everything will be paid the same because it's an economy, and I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a
Levels of, yeah,
whole another subject and
yeah,
discussion.
but yeah, it's interesting, right? And yeah, since we're in the end of the podcast, do you have any book recommendation?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So always lots of books. Let me see if I can think of one that is a good one. Well,
Yeah,
since we're talking about technology, I have many book recommendations, but for
yeah,
today, I will make one that is very focused on technology companies, especially early stage technologies that are disruptive and new. There's a book. It's an old book. It's been around for a long time. It's called
yeah,
Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore,
yeah,
and it does a great job of explaining how technology sort of works and how it gets adopted into the
yeah.
business world, into the world really, and what that looks like, and it's a good education for anybody that's looking to start a technology company or is even already in a technology company.
Yeah. No, I think one good thing about what you're doing is you're one of the companies that actually saw a problem that no one was talking about and did something about it, instead of those other companies where they just try to make something a little bit better and call it a day.
Yeah, no, this is very disruptive. I would say, and more companies now are starting to embrace autonomy, and
Yeah,
it's taken some time, but and it's not an easy problem to solve, of course.
yeah,
So yeah, absolutely, we're excited to continue to keep doing that.
it's amazing. And where can people find you?
Yeah, well, obviously online, I'm pretty easy to find me. I'm on LinkedIn, on X, it's just my first last name, Pramod Raheja, and Airgility .co. You can message there, and I'll get the message as well. So, yeah, happy to connect.
It's amazing. And thank you for joining us on the New World Podcast.
Thank you, John Paul.
That's all for today's episode of the New World Podcast. We have explored some fascinating topics with our amazing guests, shedding light on the upcoming new world. If you enjoyed today's episode and today's discussion and want to stay updated the future episodes, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, to the podcast. And if you found value on what we have discussed, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Remember, if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, or if you are interested in being a guest in the future, please feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn or email me at john.paul@aicinix.com and add New World Podcast, all capital, in the subject line so I can see it. I always love hearing from our listeners. And don't forget to check out our amazing guests. You can find more information about them via the contact details we provided earlier. Again, thank you for tuning in on the New World Podcast. I know your time is very important and I try to always make the next episode better than the last. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, keep innovating. This is John Paul Flores signing off from the New World Podcast.